If you've seen Ratatouille before, you will know what I'm about to talk about. If not, spoiler alert. Okay. Remy, a young rat, dreams of becoming a famous chef one day. After learning he can control a young man named Linguini like a marionette by pulling his hair under his chef's hat, he gets to live out his dream. He gets to cook for people. Then an incredibly harsh food critic is going to come into the restaurant to eat, Anton Ego, who threatens to shut down the restaurant and end Remy's dream. So Remy doesn't cook his most complicated or fanciest dish. Instead, he cooks a common dish, ratatouille, hence the name of the movie. Ego takes a bite, and the movie shows his mind having flashbacks to his childhood, to his mother, to love. It's a food memory, one that Ego associates with love and comfort and home. Food can spark emotions. The smell of challah, to me, smells like Shabbat. We remember great meals. We remember the food we ate with our families during the holidays. We have what are known as food memories. Our Parsha, too, discusses a special food memory, manna from heaven. Our Parsha reads, "Remember the long way that the Lord your God has made you travel in the wilderness these past 40 years, that God might test you by hardships, to learn what was in your hearts, whether you would keep God's commandments or not. God subjected you to the hardships of hunger and gave you manna to eat, which neither you nor your ancestors had ever known, in order to teach you that a person does not live on bread alone, but that a person may live on anything that the Lord decrees." Later, it says, "God brought forth water for you from a flinty rock, fed you in the wilderness with manna, which your ancestors had never known, in order to test you by hardships, only to benefit you in the end." So, I want to share 3 lessons we derive from this food memory of the gift of manna. The first is that we all have a constant need for nourishment. In the Talmud, in Yoma, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai asks a pretty good question. He asks, why didn't the manna come down to Israel once a year? You can imagine, right? Them storing it up and everything. He answered with a parable. "This thing may be compared to a king of flesh and blood who had only one son, who he provided with maintenance once a year, so that he would visit." And eventually, right, the son only visits his father once a year. Thereupon, he provided his maintenance every day, so that his son would call on him every day. The same is with Israel. One who had 4 or 5 children would worry, saying, "Perhaps no manna will come down tomorrow, and all will die of hunger." Thus, they were found to turn their attention to God in heaven. So in Rabbi Shimon's view, manna in the desert is a display of God's love and protection in the midst of a literal food desert where we had nothing. God and Israel had this daily relationship where God would feed us. And so with that constant visiting and meeting, we built up our relationship. Awareness of our own needs and dependence was matched by the awareness of God, not only as provider in a transactional sense, but as also wanting to build a relationship with us through tending to our daily care. So the next lesson we derive from this food memory is for us to remember what it was like to experience food insecurity. You see, the act of eating manna itself could be counted as part of the experience of affliction. In chapter 8, verse 2 of Deuteronomy, there's 3 verbs given. God has afflicted you, starved you, and fed you manna. These could be synonyms rather than a narrative sequence, giving shape to the experience that we felt in the desert. And this telling manna was part of the experience of hardship rather than the response. Back in the Talmud in Yoma, this time page 75, they say, who fed you manna in the desert in order to afflict you. So why is feeding manna in the desert an affliction? One who has bread in their basket is not similar to one who has no bread in their basket. So just as our memory of slavery and liberation creates within us the empathy needed to fight for freedom for others, so too, the memory of food insecurity and the anxiety surrounding that we only lived by the grace of God should inspire us to provide food for the hungry. In 2019, the overall food insecurity rate in the United States was the lowest it had ever been. In more than 20 years that we were keeping track of it. At that time, 1 in 9 individuals and 1 in 7 children lived in a food insecure household. We don't have exact numbers on what those look like now, but Feeding America believes that about 1 in 8 now are going hungry instead of 1 in 9, which translates into 42 million people, including 13 million children. The concrete application of this memory of food scarcity is to ensure that when we are experiencing abundance, we never forget what it was like to live hand to mouth, to have no savings, no safety net, to be totally reliant on the grace of God for our survival. And God fed us, so we feed others. And the last lesson, of course, comes at the end of the line. God subjected you to hardship of hunger, gave you manna to eat, which neither you nor your ancestors have ever known, in order to teach you that a person does not live on bread alone. We can be full physically and starving spiritually. Too often, we feel an emptiness that we try to fill with other things, be it food, alcohol, shopping, busyness. But none can fill us the way experiencing relationship can. Laughing with a friend, feeling our world expand when we hear a new perspective, feeling transcendence as we sing and pray in community and glimpse the divine. Just as we can't pig out eating a week's worth of calories in one day and expect to make it through the week without getting hungry again, or worse, eat once a year and expect it to be enough, we shouldn't expect to be able to give 1 day a week, or, as most Jews do, 1 day a year, to our relationship with God and expect to remain spiritually nourished. Food memories are strong. They are powerful. They connect us to people, holidays, times, places. They transport us. Just as the food critic ego in Ratatouille has the food memory he associates with love, comfort, at home. Just as, for me, French apple tarts make me think of my dad, Lakshan soup makes me think of my grandmother, and fish dipped in pancake batter was my bubby's specialty. Manna is a powerful food memory that also reminds us of God's love, our responsibility to feed others, and that our relationship needs constant tending if we want it to be there for us when we feel the hunger for something that food cannot satisfy, the hunger for unconditional love and protection. So I pray that you feel nourished this Shabbat, and that every day your soul gets fed. Shabbat Shalom.